Hegel revolutionized philosophy in a way few men did before him. Ever since the dawn of humanity in the ancient Greece, we have been trying to grapple with where rational and reason come from and whether there is a spiritual nature of things. Hegel came about and said that history is driven by dialectical contradictions, which he poses as an absolute idealism. Hegel wanted to come closer to meaning and thought that he would by an ultimate synthesis of his ideology through contradictions. Apologies for the brief synopsis of Hegel. Marx's primary influence was Hegel, but he completely twisted him on his side, turning the ideal into something purely material, at least in his eyes. Marx not only completely rejected Hegel's ideal, but he twisted it into something to represent class consciousness during the Industrial Revolution. On the other side of those who came after Hegel, you have the fascists with Giovanni Gentile. Gentile was an interesting man who emerged as a figure during post-war Italy whenever the country was looking for a national identity. But Giovanni Gentile was concerned on the act of the individual thinker themselves. Giovanni took from Hegel, and then going back way before that, the concept of idealism, but Giovanni Gentile added something which had never been seen before, that there is no difference between the conscious thinker and the material surrounding them. Therefore, the material is built by the individual thinker. For instance, if you look at a TV, according to Gentile, you have built that TV as you're looking at it. This is a completely subjectivist philosophy. So, there are very many fun and wacky ways to approach philosophy. In my opinion, this is the most serious Punnett square that you could manage in terms of philosophical worth. Because look, humans can spend a lot of time just dawdling about issues that don't matter and get really complex. But the most fundamental overarching issue is the way that you view material and the way that you view our relation to material. And so this is important. And again, I am simplifying these philosophies, but I think that serves a purpose because it's good for human beings to rationalize things in simple ways that our tiny brains can understand. And it's about what's conducive to our work as philosophers. So if you look at Marx, Marx believes in a purely material world. He believes in no spiritual element, no conscious element. That only seems to be a result of material. So kind of like an illusion or class struggle. The issue with this is that this promotes a degenerate nihilistic view that pretty much says nothing matters. And that like if someone produces literal dog shit and someone produces a giant billion-dollar corporation, that these are somehow in the same category. And so Marx is kind of a subjectivist in my opinion, even though I don't think his propaganda would put him that way. And if you actually look at his entire method, it relies on almost subjective, almost spiritual-like ignorance. Not to dismiss Marx. The contradiction is that Marx very much is not spiritual. Marx is purely material and advertises himself that way, and so we should take him as word. But I will not say that Marx is an objectivist, because for material to have meaning, it has to be objective. So if you deny the meaning of material, you deny material is objective. And so Marx and every single form of Marxism that comes out of this fits firmly into the material subjective tier. And then we have Marx's biggest rival, Gentile. People often assume that the real enemies of World War II were the Soviets and the Nazis. However, both of them were not at the intellectual forefront. The intellectual forefront was the fascist philosophers and the Marxist philosophers, to which the fascists lost, and so now we have international Marxism. But the fascists could never win intellectually because they were not able to extend their philosophy into new forms, whereas Marx was very able to do this even after his death. So when we have the fascists, it's really good to say they are entirely spiritualist to the point they do not believe in the material reality of any sort. And they're also completely subjectivist, as in you literally create reality with your mind. And so the fascists, I think, go very firmly into the spiritual subjective. This is important because it clashes with Marxism. They both are subjective. They take that from, I think, the form that they do with Hegel, and yet they go on completely opposite ends of the subjectivist triad, one being a materialist view that ends in class struggle, and the other being a spiritualist view that ends in submission to the state as a collective. So we have our two on the Punnett square, and that seems to be all we have for today. Except there's actually two more Punnett square additions which I think are important to add. For the longest time, I had never studied Ayn Rand in totality. I understood that she was a woman, Jewish, Russian philosopher, and that was kind of interesting, but she never really piqued my interest. Until one day I started reading her books, The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. And for the longest time, Rand was my main inspiration. She was my primary hero in all of this. And it was sort of interesting because I felt as though I would still feel that way, and yet there's something off. See, Ayn Rand was the first philosopher, supposedly, to fully put reason at the forefront. Marx came close to reason, but his subjective and collectivist views of things were not conducive to reason. Of course, Ayn Rand seemed to go in the exact opposite direction, where she believes in a fully objective, reasonable, logical, valuable world, which only comes through that way because of objective reason. Her philosophy, Objectivism, really focuses on the objective, rational truth as the primacy of the world. And so she does reject spirituality, but she does seem to be completely objective and material in her thinking. Rand also goes for an extreme individualism, which really says that there should not be any government, except for perhaps a very limited one, and that really the individual is the enterprise of all reason. She is fully against religion in any form, and supports full capitalism. Unlike fascism and Marxism, Ayn Rand's objectivism has arguably never been tried in society. Sure, we have a bit of a capitalist system now, but it's not objectivist in the way that she would have laid out. I think that's why historians are quite nice to Rand overall, because we've never seen her ideas fully enacted, but I think we can see them materialise in our world today. I have quite a bit of feelings on Ayn Rand, and I think her philosophy is rather refreshing, although also has a ton of issues. So I might do a video at some point on my overall thoughts of Ayn Rand, as I couldn't really cover them here. So on the quadrant of viewing reality, which I know might be a bit simplified, we have fascism as spiritual subjective, we have Marxism as material and subjective, we have Rand as the extreme material and objective, and all of these philosophies have one thing in common. They're all reactions trying to gauge the world around them with their own instincts. They're all having merit in their own rights, and they're all certainly worth it, as all philosophies are. But if we are to have a good philosophy, we have to assume the errors of these ones into our pockets so we can have them be a better one. What you need is a conscious philosophy which is somehow able to answer the questions that these ones present us with. Now, what you would have to accept is the merit of philosophy in of itself, that it allows humans to think and reason, it allows us to interact with metaphysics, and it has an element which allows us to spiritually connect through reason. If we bring all of these together, it's very easy to see the issues and the strengths of these philosophies. The strength is that they are all rigorous at thinking individually. They all produce something very stable and very good. The problem is whenever they have assumptions that they are the only correct philosophy in the world, whereas in reality, they fall to pieces. We as humans have a very limited ability to predict all of reality and to play God, which is why our philosophy and science has always fallen flat at doing so. And so what you need then is a philosophy which is trying to be a conscious philosophy of philosophies. A philosophy which accepts human reason as its basis, but sees that in a spiritual, larger sense. And that's where you get colonialism, which I would put in the top corner of the quadrant for objective and spiritual. It believes in a complete objective reality that we exist in, that drives all of material structures, and yet is imbued with a spiritual meaning due to the fact that material exists because of higher formulas that we can't see. The purpose of humanity then is that we are material that can derive spiritual meaning from it. This puts it on a metaphysical level that can develop in a way as the others have. To be conscious requires more than the individual. To be conscious requires a society that has such strengths that is able to consistently project these high formulas of objective reason. As we discover that, we can do it through the power of individual engineering and the will of the individual over the collective to form spiritual connections, to bridge objective and subjective into one's own. People will fall into subjectivism time and time again, but we accept that as a grounding for material development, using material development in order to impart a spiritual sense of purpose through higher order and material. And if a society is able to do this, that will be the strength. Instead of the primacy of one specific idea, there will be a primacy of consciousness itself, which allows us to interact with other ideas. We would accept then that there are material branches that come from spiritual elements that allow for us to exist underneath them. The ultimate act of this is through individual triumph, creating an external construct of reason for others to develop through as well. This is not collective because it's collaborative amongst multiple individual minds, and it is the highest construct humanity can bridge. This gives us our will to power back that all of these philosophies are trying to answer. Now, you don't need colonialism in particular. You could say this is a form of Christian revisionism, a form of romantic cultural nationalism, or a form of romantic objectivism. But all of them go into this fourth quadrant, which I think we really could use in our lives, because we've never really given a society to try on this fourth quadrant of a spiritual grounding and objective material world.